Cade Povich was outstanding in his Oriole Park debut, and Colton Cowser played hero off the bench. And it all adds up to a win over the Braves and the Orioles' 6th consecutive victory. And I'll recap it all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Orioles fans, today is Thursday, June 13th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles' 4-2 victory over the Atlanta Braves on Wednesday night to clinch this series. I'll get you 5 things you need to know from one, including a fantastic first home start for Cade Povich, big-time heroics from Colton Cowser, and the Oriole bullpen having its first slip-up in a while, but in the end, it really didn't matter. Plus, we'll talk a little bit about kind of where the bullpen stands, right? Day one without Danny Coulombe and why there were guys like Keegan Aiken pitching in big spots. And then finally talk a bit about Cedric Mullins, who had a couple of hits on Wednesday night and why, even if he continues to struggle, he's not losing that roster spot. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Tax Network USA. Did you know that it's never too late to resolve your tax issues with the IRS? Don't wait. Reduce your tax debt and get help from a team of licensed tax professionals. Call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. Let's start today with an Orioles victory. Final score from Wednesday night at the Yard in Game 2 of a 3-game set. It's the Orioles 4 and the Atlanta Braves 2, as the O's have now won the first 2 games of the series. They've clinched the 3-game set, and they have won 6 in a row, as they are now 45-22 on the season. And again, as I record, the Yankees have a giant lead over the Royals in Kansas City, so it's still going to be a 2.5-game deficit. Don't worry, the O's play the Yankees in New York next week. They can make it up themselves. They seem to be the only team out there that is able to beat the Yankees. But it's another win for the Orioles. And it's not just 6 straight wins, but the Orioles have played 20 games since that first sweep was over when they lost all 3 in St. Louis. The Orioles are 16-4 in those 20 games since the sweep. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the 4-2 victory on Wednesday night. The first thing you need to know is Colton Cowser played hero for the Orioles off the bench. And it's been a bit of a tough stretch for Cowser. He was amazing, sensational in the month of April, taking over the starting left field job, winning AL Rookie of the Month. And then things kind of went downhill. He hit just 188 with a 580 OPS in May. And he's been even worse in June. Coming into Wednesday's game, he was hitting just 161 with a 493 OPS in the month of June. Once again, did not get the start in the lineup, despite it being a right-handed starter on the mound for the Braves. But he came in and delivered. Now, he didn't actually come in for offense. Cowser came in defensively in the top of the 8th inning when the Orioles were leading 2-0. Ryan O'Hearn started the game in right field. And when you have Cowser on the bench, that is a huge defensive upgrade in a close game late. That was the easy call to make. Now, I thought Brandon Hyde might wait until the 9th inning to put Cowser in because Ryan O'Hearn was due up 3rd in the bottom of the 8th inning. And I thought, hey, maybe he'd try to get one more at bat out of him. But the cool thing about having, Colton Cowser on the bench, or even Kyle Stowers, another guy on the bench who you could have used in that spot, is that it's not like Ryan McKenna, where yes, he upgrades your defense, but if his bat comes up, you're not going to get much. When you have Cowser or Stowers to use, it's like, okay, our defense gets upgraded and we still have a chance to do damage in the bottom half of the inning. And Cowser made a nice catch in foul territory in the top of the 8th, but then things changed, and we'll get to it. The Braves scored 2 in the top of the 8th to tie the game at 2, and so his at-bat meant a lot more. And after Ryan Mountcastle singled with 1 out in the 2-2 game, Cowser came up against Joe Jimenez, who has been phenomenal this year out of the Braves bullpen. And he delivered on the first pitch, crushing a ball out towards right center field, just over the wall, out of the outstretched reach of Brave center fielder Michael Harris. Hit it 108 off the bat, 392 feet for a 2-run go-ahead homer in the bottom of the 8th inning to give the Orioles a 4-2 lead. And for Cowser, I mentioned the struggles. It is his first home run of June, actually his first home run since May 26th in Chicago. Cowser hasn't homered since I got married. That was the day of my wedding. It has been a while now for Colton Cowser. And it was also the first home run allowed all year by Brave setup man Joe Jimenez. So pretty cool moment there for Cowser. He's still been hitting the ball hard. His quality of contact has still been good the last month and a half, despite the stats going down. He's probably not as good as he was in April. He's not nearly as bad as his stats showed in May. He's somewhere in the middle, and maybe this big home run will kind of get him back to where we know he can be as a hitter for the O's. Second thing you need to know from the Orioles win on Wednesday is that Cade Povich was absolutely sensational in his second big league start, making his Oriole Park debut on Wednesday after he was called up to start last Thursday afternoon's game in Toronto for his major league debut. Gave up 6 runs over 5 1/3. The line looks worse than he really was. I thought he showed real flashes and showed enough to earn another start in the big leagues. And the Orioles, at least for now, going with a 6-man rotation, gave Povich another chance. And he took the bull by the horns on Wednesday night with his family in attendance, with his old college coach in attendance. It was a matchup of 2 Nebraska pitchers, with Spencer Schwellenbach going for the Braves, and Aaron Bummer, who also pitched at Nebraska, came out of the bullpen for Atlanta. The Masson broadcast said it was the first time in 7 years that 3 Nebraska players had appeared in one game, which is pretty cool to have also Darren Erstad in the crowd. And Cade Povich was dealing 6 scoreless innings for the rookie lefty, 5 hits, no walks, 6 strikeouts on just 89 pitches, carving up the Braves lineup. Now, he got hit a little bit harder than he did in his last start, which will tend to happen against an offense, despite its struggles, as good as Atlanta's is. But in general, after just 2 hard hit balls his last time out, he gave up 7 in this one. So, he was squared up a little bit more. But I thought the stuff was still really, really good. The stuff was even better, honestly, from Cade Povich in start number 2. Fastball, cutter, curveball. He pounded the zone with all of them, and it was really a cool combination. So we got 6 strikeouts on the day. All of them were 5 of the 6 were swinging. 5 of the 6 were on the curveball, and the 6th was on the sweeper. So it was all breaking stuff that was getting him the strikeouts. But what he was doing was a really cool combination. It was very similar to his first start, where he was throwing high fastballs, getting a lot of pop-ups, a lot of lazy fly balls, but he was pouring in the cutter for called strikes. And then he would get the swing and miss on the breaking stuff. The fastball had a good amount of called strikes as well. Even the curveball, he could both drop it in for a strike and drop it below the zone for a swing and miss. That was a devastating pitch for Povich, and he was just around the strike zone. I talked about how he was successful in his first couple of innings in Toronto when he pounded the zone. Then he tried to get too cute, walked some guys, and got into trouble in that first start. Well, this time, he just stayed aggressive the entire time through the entire 6 innings, didn't walk anyone, got the key outs. And I was kind of surprised Brandon Hyde let him work through that 6th inning. He came back out for the 6th at right around 80 pitches, and he got the first out of the inning. And then he allowed a couple of hits, a single, a grounder, and then another single. And the Braves had first and second, 2 outs. It was a 2-0 game in the top of the 6th. And there's a bunch of righties coming up. And I'm just thinking he's probably going to pull him. He's almost at 90 pitches. But no, he let Cade Povich face Adam Duvall, and Duvall on the second pitch on a good high fastball got him to pop up to Gunnar Henderson to end the inning. Thought that was a really good growth and development moment for Povich to be allowed to pitch out of that jam. And I just loved what I saw. And I'll tell you right now, I am in for, at the very least, another start for the Orioles from the rookie lefty. Third thing you need to know from Wednesday night's game is that it was just a good day for Cedric Mullins, who hasn't had a lot of those at the plate lately, but had 2 hits, a single and a double, a couple of hard hit balls, and a run scored. He started the Orioles' 2-run rally in the 3rd inning with a leadoff double that he hit 105.8 miles per hour off the bat. Surprisingly for Mullins, that is his 2nd hardest hit ball of the 2024 season, and the hardest he's hit anything since May 7th. It's been over a month since he's hit a ball that hard. That was a great result for him and great process at the plate. Even one of his flyouts was hard hit in this game, played a good center field, made a nice catch on the final out of the game, which you're going to expect from Cedric Mullins. And he started that rally. It was a leadoff double in the 3rd inning. The Orioles really didn't have the ball leave the infield to bring those runs home, but it was an RBI ground out, an RBI fielder's choice, where the throw home was wide because of the speed of Mateo. And the O's kind of played small ball to get 2 runs on the board in the 3rd against Schwellenbach to take the lead. But for Mullins, not only was it great to hit the ball hard like that and get 2 hits. It was only his 7th multi-hit game of the season, but he does have 2 of them in his last 4 games. He also had a multi-hit outing on Sunday in Tampa with a triple included, does it again with the double and the single. Hopefully that can get him going, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, the fourth thing you need to know from the O's win over the Braves in Game 2 of the series is that Keegan Akin came in and unfortunately ended what has been an amazing run by the Oriole bullpen. I talked about it on yesterday's episode, how the Orioles bullpen in the last 13 games had a sub 0.5 ERA. It was ridiculous. Only 2 earned runs in their last 13 games, and they had a streak going of 9 consecutive games by the Oriole bullpen without allowing an earned run. It had been pretty impressive, but that snapped on Wednesday night. Now, Keegan Akin had come in the 7th, got the final out against a lefty to keep the Orioles up 2-0. And he went back out there for the 8th, and it made sense. The Orioles bullpen wasn't super rested, which we'll get to. And it was switch hitter righty lefty due up to start the 8th in a 2-0 game. And it seemed like a spot that Akin could handle. He had a bad ending to May, but he's been pitching really well so far in June. He gave up a leadoff single, then he got a strikeout of Ozuna, and he's facing the lefty Matt Olson. Like, this is the guy he should be able to go right at and get. And instead, he just pours a fastball down the middle, and Olson demolishes it into right field for a game-tying 2-run homer off of Akin. It was the correct move to have him out there, especially because the bullpen availability, which we will get to. And Akin's been better in June, but when he had that bad stretch, had 3 really bad outings right at the end of May, it wasn't the righties that were beating him. It was surprisingly the lefties. He would get ahead of guys, and then he would just groove fastballs down the middle, just miss with a fastball. Instead of like missing out of the zone, he'd miss down the middle and was getting crushed by left-handed hitters. And it happened again here. And it was unfortunate, and it was great that the Orioles recovered and still won the game. But this is something we might see more of, not necessarily these relievers giving up leads, but just guys like Akin in spots like this in a 2-0 game in the 8th inning without Danny Coulombe and without a lot of off days. And we will get to that in just a little bit, but it's the first slip up in a while from this O's pen, which has just been fantastic here in the month of June. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from the Orioles 4-2 win over the Braves on Wednesday night, taking the first 2 games of this series, that the rest of the bullpen that the Orioles had available locked it down. Dylan Tate got the first 2 outs of the 7th inning before Akin came in. Sinker again, averaging 94 up to 95 plus. Really love to see the velocity from Tate. And then Craig Kimbrell came in after Akin, and Akin did a nice job to at least get the final 2 outs of the 8th and keep it a 2-2 game. And then after the O's took the lead on that Cowser home run, Kimbrell came out there. It's been back-to-back kind of shaky outings. Gave up a run in Toronto last week where, they got a weird run off of him, but got it run. And then, he was out there earlier this week and the stuff wasn't super crisp and he was kind of in and out of the strike zone a little bit. He's been okay. It hasn't been bad. It's just looked a little shaky a couple of the last times he's been out there in the last week, but he went right out there and worked himself a 1-2-3 inning to get another save and clinch the Oriole win. It was an even split, 6 fastballs, 6 curveballs. That's what you'd like to see from Kimbrell. He's throwing those pitches for strikes. Only took him 12 pitches, gets the bottom of the order, and secures the Orioles win, their 6th in a row. But for the O's, it was a little harder than it needed to be at the end to win this game, just because they did not have their A bullpen out there, and that's because they just didn't have the A bullpen available. So coming up next, I'm going to kind of talk about why Brandon Hyde used the relievers he did on Wednesday night, and what this shows us, right? This is day 1 without Danny Coulombe, and how this could snowball a little bit, because they're in a little bit of a touchy spot without Coulombe in that bullpen at the moment. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. For me, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you could turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. You can make a Prize Picks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. All you need to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. It is truly that easy. And it's not just baseball. It's the NBA Finals, and the finals mean more on Prize Picks. And so do the star players. You get boosted payouts on select basketball stars that you won't find anywhere else. You just kind of go to the app, right? Maybe it's Gunnar Henderson, more or less than 1.5 hits in tonight's game. Maybe it's game 4 of the NBA Finals, Jason Tatum, more or less than 30.5 points. You just make your picks. It takes like a minute, and then you just win money. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the PrizePicks app today, use code LOCKEDONMLB, and get a first deposit match up to $100 at PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And today's episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Policygenius. A lot of life is unpredictable, but a good life insurance plan gives your family a financial safety net to protect against some of the unknowns. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It makes choosing the right policy for your family easy and quick. And with Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. And they know, and we know, getting life insurance can be a tough process. It's something you don't want to talk about, don't want to think about. It can be very, very stressful. But Policygenius, they have no incentive to recommend one insurer over the other. So you can always trust their guidance. And the guidance is key here in truly a situation like this, when you are going to talk about what happens next and what happens with life insurance. So get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. So the Orioles took down the Braves 4-2 on Wednesday night in Game 2 of this series, but it wasn't without a little snafu from the Orioles bullpen. Keegan Aiken giving up a monster 2-run homer to Matt Olson that tied the game in the 8th inning. First time in the last 10 games that the Oriole bullpen had allowed an earned run. And it was definitely a special, specific situation that the Orioles are in, right? They haven't had an off day in a while. They don't have another one till Monday. They just lost Danny Coulombe, who went on the injured list with elbow inflammation on Tuesday. And the Orioles are going with a 6-man rotation at the moment, which means you have one less reliever, only 7 guys out there instead of 8. And you also had a good amount of pitchers unavailable. Cionel Perez, not available on Wednesday night, had pitched in 3 of the last 4 games. Yennier Cano, not available, had pitched in 2 straight and 3 of the last 4 games. And Jacob Webb threw a whole lot of pitches on Tuesday and has been pitching a lot lately as well. So all 3 of those guys, for correct reasons, simply unavailable on Wednesday night. So because you have the shorter bullpen with the 6-man rotation and 3 guys unavailable, you went into Wednesday's games with only 4 relievers. That's why it was so huge that Cade Povich, not just that he was scoreless, but just in general, that he gave the Orioles 6 innings on Wednesday night. Brian Baker, Keegan Aiken, Dylan Tate, and Craig Kimbrell were the only pitchers you had. And Kimbrell's only pitching probably in the 9th or 10th or 11th if they would need him at that point. So you're trying to get to the 9th with Baker, Aiken, and Kimbrell. And although Brian Baker was warming up in the top of the 8th inning for a little while there, he didn't get into the game. I'm pretty sure Brandon Hyde does not want to, and I don't think you, the Orioles fan, want to see Brian Baker make his 2024 debut after being called up for the first time this year on Tuesday. You don't want to see that be in a high leverage spot. I talked about it on yesterday's episode. They're going to want to ease Baker in a little bit with some lower leverage spots, see how he's pitching in the bigs this year before they give him any high leverage chances. But they almost didn't have the chance to do it. Now, Dylan Tate came out there in the 7th, and they didn't let him go longer because he's pitched a lot lately as well. And he threw an inning on Tuesday night to close out the game. And it was the right spot to go to Aiken when they did. He gets the lefty out in the 7th. He's facing the lefties in the 8th. And unfortunately, he just didn't get Matt Olson out. That was maybe going to be the last guy he faced. And I was intrigued to see what the O's would have done. Let's say Aiken just gets Olson out in that spot. So the Braves have a runner on first and 2 down in a 2-0 game in the 8th and a bunch of righties coming up with Baker warming. Baker may have actually come into that game, but the fact that Aiken gave up the 2-run homer meant the leverage was still high, but maybe a little less high. So they left Aiken in. He actually got the next 2 righties out, which was nice to get out of the 8th inning. So you didn't have to use Baker. You take the lead and Kimbrell gives you the 1-2-3 9th. But here's the thing. When you have a 7-man bullpen, because you're doing a 6-man rotation, and Brian Baker, it's not that, I think he's going to do poorly. It's just that he hasn't thrown in the big leagues this year. You're not going to trust him in a high leverage spot. So once you get to like the 7th inning and on and the game's close, you kind of lose Brian Baker, at least for now. So you were kind of down to, because it was a 2-0 game when Cade Povich left, you were down to basically 3 pitchers to get you 9 outs. And if anyone stumbles, like Aiken did, it can put you in a really, really bad spot. And without Danny Coulombe being one of those 7, it's just one less guy who's you can trust in high leverage. And it's one more guy who you don't trust much at all. Now, we did hear from Danny Coulombe on Wednesday. He got his MRI. He doesn't have the results back, but he was talking about how optimistic it was. And he kind of said something to the media like, not the injury you're thinking of, alluding to basically saying, hey, I'm pretty confident this is not something that's going to need Tommy John. Now, Danny Coulombe is not his doctor. He's just Danny Coulombe, but it seems like at least he's in good spirits at the moment. We're hoping for good news. He only misses a few weeks and can return to the Orioles because they certainly need him in that bullpen. Coulombe, of course, going on the IL Tuesday with some elbow inflammation that he felt on Monday. But the question can be, how much does the 6-man rotation hurt you? This is something I talk about all the time. When Brandon Hyde was talking about maybe doing a 6-man rotation in June, they're doing it at least for now with Povich and Suarez in the starting rotation. But I talked about, hey, the big drawback is with all these games without off days, you already lose a reliever, and you're going to just in general have less guys available because they're going to pitch more and get more tired with more days with games in them. This is the drawback of the 6-man rotation. You just have less guys out there. And then when you add in the fact that, guys you could have trusted as relievers like Tyler Wells and Danny Coulombe are currently on the injured list, you've got more guys up in the big league bullpen who you're just not ready to trust yet. And kind of the question is, okay, say you go back to a 5-man rotation, so you bring up another reliever. If you do that while Coulombe's still out, you're still pulling someone else from AAA. And like maybe it's Nick Vespi, a guy who's been up and down. Maybe it's Jonathan Heasley, who's been here a few times already this season. But overall, like if you pull up an 8th guy right now, is that really another guy you can trust somewhat? Maybe eventually it would become that guy. But right now, anybody you call up from AAA is also not going to be put into any high leverage spots. So it's a little bit of 6-man rotation. It's a little bit of a tired bullpen, but it's also a little bit of the Orioles are getting really injured right now, pitching wise. And it just pushes more and more. They're going to need to make some additions. And remember, when the Orioles went and got Shintaro Fujinami at the deadline last year, they did it like 3 weeks before the trade deadline. I have a feeling there's going to be a trade for a reliever like that that's going to be done sooner rather than later. At the very least, I see another kind of waiver claim, small trade coming. I'm going to call my shot right now. Jose Hernandez, a kind of interesting left-handed pitcher who does have minor league options and has good strikeout numbers, was DFA'd by the Pirates on either Tuesday or Wednesday this week. I would not be surprised at all if he is a Baltimore Oriole by the end of this week. Just, you don't have to hold me to it too much because it's just kind of a shot in the dark. But Jose Hernandez, watch the name. I'm going to call my shot here and think he could be an Oriole. But that's kind of the situation with the bullpen, especially without Coulombe. The hope is, here's the thing for Thursday, right? Like Cano probably available again, Perez and Webb probably available again, but you like to get a spot where you can get Brian Baker into a game, preferably today, to at least see what he can do. And then you kind of go from there. But it's going to be tougher spots for the bullpen. They've been great. They might show some cracks just because there's only so many injuries and spots without off days you can handle. Imagine if the starting pitchers were struggling. This would be a bad spot, but the Orioles bullpen has really held it down. Hopefully just a little blip and not something that's starting to crack right here as they get into less and less, solid situations for them, especially without a guy like Danny Coulombe. But someone who has definitely struggled this year, although he did have a good game on Wednesday, is Cedric Mullins. It's been a tough season for him. I'm not going to get into an entire diatribe here, but I just wanted to give my quick thoughts because getting a lot of questions, seeing a lot of talk about Cedric Mullins. I kind of wanted to set the record straight on what he means to this O's team and what his role is going to be, even if he does continue to struggle. That's coming up next to finish off the pod. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Tax Network USA. Here at Locked On Orioles, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or hopefully the playoffs. It's year-round. You know what else is year-round? Collection season. And just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garner your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. It's something I might need as, a contractor in this job. You get a lot of tax questions. Tax Network USA can help. With over 14 years of experience and an A-plus rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or you finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. You can also see the link in the episode description below. So it was, of course, pretty great to see the Orioles get their 6th straight win on Wednesday night, beating the Braves again. It was also pretty great to see Cedric Mullins get another 2-hit game. And maybe, just maybe, after he had that 0 for 25, the bat is starting to come around a little bit. And we know it hasn't been good for Mullins. Entering play on Wednesday, Cedric Mullins this season, in about 200 plate appearances, hitting 174, 222 on base, 310 slugging. That's a 532 OPS, a 54 OPS plus. That's not good. He's striking out. He's not walking a whole lot. And since May 1st, he's been even worse, hitting 125 with a 345 OPS for Cedric Mullins. Strikeouts are up. Quality of contact is down a little bit. Those stats are from, comparing to last year. But here's the thing. I saw a lot of talk about, hey, when Jorge Mateo returns from the IL, which he did on Tuesday, I saw some fans saying, Cedric Mullins should be the guy that is sent down. Now, there's kind of a question now on whether or not Mullins can actually be optioned. He's like right on the brink of the amount of service time that doesn't allow you to be optioned anymore without approving it yourself. Either way, Cedric Mullins, people who listen to Locked On Orioles podcast knew that Connor Newcomb was the guy who was going to be sent back down to AAA no matter what when Mateo came back. But I kind of can't believe people want Mullins down in AAA. Like, I get that he struggled. He has been bad this year, specifically against lefties, right? He sat again against a lefty on Tuesday night, hitting 143 with a 401 OPS against lefties this year. That's his OPS is around 600 against righties. That's not good either, but at least if you throw him out there, it's not an automatic out against a righty. It basically is against a lefty at this point. But Cedric Mullins, and it's not just about what he's done in the past. It's not about a 30-30 season, not about the leader he's been. It's about the value he still provides to this team. He plays great defense in center field. He runs the bases well. Even if he ends up being like the 4th or 5th outfielder on this team, he gets relegated to that role full time because he's just struggling so much at the plate. He still provides you value in that spot. If he's in that spot, he's better than Ryan McKenna in that spot. He's better than Kyle Stowers in that spot. He's better than some of these other guys in that spot because he can provide so much for you even off the bench. And that's what I don't understand. Like, it's not like Mullins is playing every day. He is fully sitting against lefties, and he's even sitting against some righties because he's been struggling. He, at this point, is kind of a part-time player, at least recently since the start of May, because he has struggled so much with the bat. And when you compare it to Jorge Mateo, that's what I wanted to quickly do here to kind of make my point about Mullins is not losing his job. Even if he loses kind of a regular starting role, he's going to be a bench player on this roster at the very least for the remainder of the season. Look at Jorge Mateo. Had the incredible April last year. Then from May 1st on last season, hit 179 with a 472 OPS. He was the worst qualified hitter in baseball last year from May 1st on. He was worse than Mullins is now during that stretch from May 1st to the end of the season. But he was still rostered because you know what? He could still hit lefties a little bit, and he was a great defender in the infield, and he was one of the fastest players in baseball and could really help you out. Cedric Mullins fits a similar mold, but with a much longer and better track record than Jorge Mateo as a hitter for the Orioles, which gives him another tick. And he is one of the leaders in that clubhouse too. That means something for a team like this that is very young as well. And John Mioli was on our podcast we love over here, Orioles on the Verge, the other day, and explained it like this, which I thought was perfect. Mateo was the worst player in baseball last year, hitting-wise, who played a lot after May 1st. He was not a Mike Elias draft pick. He was simply a waiver claim. He was a bench player at best. There was all this young infield talent knocking on the door. And yet he was still rostered all year on a 100-win team. Now, you can argue that was not the right move, but hey, his bat picked up down the stretch. His legs were great to help you off the bench late. And remember, he had a 4-hit game in the postseason. He was one of the only Orioles hitters who showed up when they were swept in the ALDS by the Rangers. And despite all the struggles he had still during the season, he kept his roster spot and almost $3 million in arbitration to return to the Orioles in 2024 after all of that. So you look at Jorge Mateo and then you compare to Cedric Mullins, which much more of a track record, much better standing on this team, and the same ability to play great defense and steal bases. And we know the bat is in there. He's not going anywhere. Yeah, he might get relegated to a fourth outfield spot or a fifth outfield spot, or specifically a guy who starts, once, maybe twice a week, and besides that is a pinch runner and a defensive replacement. Even if it gets to that point, which it could, if he continues to struggle, he's not losing his roster spot. I can't believe people want to see him down in AAA. Like, if he's in that fourth or fifth outfielder role, other guys get more chances at the plate that you want to see, and Mullins still helps the team. He's not getting jettisoned to Norfolk. And here's the other thing. Been swinging it better as of late. 2 of his last 4 games with multiple hits. I'm confident Cedric Mullins is too good and too talented to not get heated up at some point this year. It is still June. We are not even halfway through the season. He's still got plenty of time to get it going, and he will. Austin Hayes was abysmal. Got it going. Ramon Arias was abysmal. Got it going. These guys can hit. Cedric Mullins has been in his career a better player than both of those guys. He's going to get it going. Just give him time. But even if he doesn't, he still helps this team as a bench player. He makes your team better as one of your 26 guys out there in a similar way that Mateo did last year. At worst, Mullins can do that this year. I wanted to address it. I've seen it too much about sending Mullins down. He's got a spot on this team. He will get enough leeway to hit his way out of this, and he will be a contributor to this Orioles lineup as the season goes on. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are, of course, back tomorrow for another pod, the final episode of the week. I'll be recapping Game 3 of this series between the Orioles and the Braves. It'll either be, the Orioles ended their winning streak, but they won a series, or it'll be another sweep for the O's. And on the mound for Baltimore is Cole Irvin. What a season it's been. 2.87 ERA, but he's going up against one of the great starting pitching stories in baseball this year, Reynaldo Lopez, who was signed in the offseason, the right-hander, by the Braves. He had been a reliever. They turned him back into a starter, and he's got a 1.85 ERA on the season. Should be a good matchup. Little day baseball at the Yard, 1:05 start on Thursday. And I'm back tomorrow to recap it all, get you any other updates you may need on Danny Coulombe and anything else from the Oriole world. And also, I'll get you ready for a huge sold-out series at the Yard this weekend between the O's and the Phillies. But that's tomorrow. Till then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.